Tonight, Barack Obama's foreign policy legacy. Which of his disasters was the worst? It's December 28th, and you're watching The Ezra Levant Show. Why should others go to jail when you're the biggest carbon consumer I know?
There's 8,500 customers here, and you won't give them an answer.
You come here once a year with a sign, and you feel morally superior.
The only thing I have to say to the government about why I publish it is because it's my bloody right to do so.
We're coming to the end of 2015, which means it's almost the U.S. presidential year, 2016. Of course, the campaign has been going on for months, or in Hillary Clinton's case, for her whole life. But instead of talking about the candidates for 2016, I want to take a moment to assess Barack Obama's legacy for the past 7 years. As I look around the world, other than Cuba and Iran, I can't think of a single country, friend or foe, that's closer to America now than when Obama took over. It's very acute in the case of Russia, where Obama and Clinton, as his Secretary of State, had a very showy break from George W. Bush's caution, calling for a total reset of relations. Yeah, that led to the invasion and permanent annexation of a strategic part of Ukraine called Crimea. Obama has been similarly obsequious to every third world tyrant. Here he is high-fiving the late Venezuelan dictator Hugo Chavez. Can you imagine how dispiriting seeing that picture would be to a democracy activist on the ground in Venezuela, let alone Venezuelans' democratic neighbors like Colombia that Chavez was always trying to destabilize? Or this absolutely bizarre deep bow by Obama before the King of Saudi Arabia. American presidents do not bow. No Americans bow. America was built on not bowing to royalty, let alone such alien royalty, the theocratic fascists of the House of Saud. Who bows to a tyrant? Someone who too often has taken everyone else's side against America, that's who. Friends have been pushed away. Ukraine, Israel, NATO allies like Poland, the Baltics, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan have been given notice that they're on their own with North Korea and increasingly China. Egypt was thrown to the Muslim Brotherhood wolves with Obama's approval. Only Egypt's military pulled it back from the brink. Obama hastily abandoned Iraq, creating a power vacuum filled by the Islamic State terrorists and by Iran. Let me take a moment to show you some milestones on this path of disaster. First, let's look at Obama's first major foreign policy speech, delivered shortly after his inauguration in 2009. It was done at Al-Azhar, the great Sunni Muslim university and mosque in Cairo, the capital of Egypt. The speech was called A New Beginning. And the closest analogy to this would be if a Muslim leader like an Ayatollah from Iran were to come to the Vatican in Rome to speak to all of Christendom. That's essentially what Obama did and what he said he was doing. His entire speech had the conceit of speaking for the West on behalf of the free world, speaking to all of Islam directly. He couldn't have been clearer about it. I mean, liberals get squeamish when people use the president's full name, Barack Hussein Obama, but mainly because it reminds people he was born a Muslim under Sharia law. I mean, his father, Barack Hussein Obama Sr., was a Muslim. Obama says he later became a Christian, which some people doubt. I'm sure it's true enough. But that day in Cairo in 2009, in his speech, he wanted every Muslim to know he was one of them.
Now, much has been made of the fact that an African American with the name Barack Hussein Obama could be elected president.
It wasn't just his name. He grew up with a Muslim dad, and then a Muslim stepdad, and then he grew up in a Muslim country.
As a boy, I spent several years in Indonesia and heard the call of the azan at the break of dawn and at the fall of dusk.
Obama used the word Muslim 46 times in that speech, and the word Islam another 23 times. He didn't use the words terrorism or terror or jihad even once, because his point was to apologize on behalf of the West and to promise Islam that the West, at least the parts he could control, would not be assertive anymore in the whole region.
I've come here to Cairo to seek a new beginning between the United States and Muslims around the world.
It was a giant apology tour, apologizing for U.S. foreign policy, saying that America had more work to do in its own civil rights for its own women saying this in a country where women are legally subordinate, in a region where gender apartheid and honor killings are rampant. Not only did Obama signal retreat, he confessed a false guilt. And there it was, proof for all the world's Muslims that America really was as evil as all their conspiracy theories had claimed. After all, why would a great president apologize and make confessions for a great country if it wasn't true? Around the same time, Obama gave notice to NATO allies that he was pretty much sick of this whole leader of the free world thing, go team kind of thing. Obama didn't think America was particularly special, and it certainly lacked the moral authority to tell other countries what to do.
I believe in American exceptionalism, just as I suspect that the Brits believe in British exceptionalism and the Greeks believe in Greek exceptionalism.
So the dominoes started to fall. Egypt itself fell to the Muslim Brotherhood terrorists. Libya's Muammar Gaddafi fell. He was pushed, actually, by America with Canada's help, but no one stayed around to build anything to pick up the pieces, so Al-Qaeda and now the Islamic State took over. Syria was split in two between Islamic terrorists and a more secular but equally bloodthirsty dictator, Bashar Assad. Yemen is under Islamic attack. Iran has a hand in every one of these fights and is racing to build a nuclear bomb. All of this happened under Obama's watch. All of it encouraged and accelerated by Obama's own fecklessness. America's friends, like Egypt, couldn't count on it. America's enemies knew they never really needed to be afraid of it. When Syria's Bashar Assad was accused of using chemical weapons on his own enemies in his civil war, Obama said it finally crossed a red line and he would attack militarily.
We have been very clear to the Assad regime, but also to other players on the ground, that a red line for us is we start seeing a whole bunch of chemical weapons moving around or being utilized. I didn't set a red line. The world set a red line.
But then he didn't attack. Foreign policy bores Obama, or it frustrates him. Every success in his life has been through affirmative action from guilty white liberals, or through speeches that gave guilty white liberals, or at least American journalists, a tingle in their leg. But those things don't seem to work in foreign affairs. I mean, political correctness and postmodern liberalism, that's a Western syndrome. Vladimir Putin doesn't respond to it. Playing the race card doesn't work in Arabia. If anything, they're racist against blacks. They're not guilty white liberals. So it just doesn't work. Either he doesn't care, like in Libya, or he has more important goals, like pulling out troops from Iraq too hastily to furnish himself with a campaign talking point in the 2012 presidential election. But mainly, look, the world isn't bending to his will like so many other problems or people have done his whole life. So he goes golfing, or he goes clubbing with celebrities, rappers, or doing late night talk shows on the comedy circuit. He's a hit there. The world is burning, but he's entertaining, and that's good enough for the media party. The explosive growth of the Islamic State terrorist group is truly a proto-state with 10 million citizens living under it, with taxes and industry and schools and courts. Well, it's been met with boredom and irritation by Obama. He's written them off as impotent time and again, and by coincidence, he always does so just before their major attacks, like this, right before the Paris attacks.
What is true is that from the start, our goal has been first to contain, and we have contained them.
Yeah, no. Or like this, right before San Bernardino.
ISIL is not going to pose an existential threat to us, and the American people should feel confident that we're going to be able to defend ourselves.
No. Look, he has no strategy. His Oval Office address the other day, right after the San Bernardino attack, he spent just 160 words on the Islamic State terrorist group. He spoke for the same length about the need for more gun control for American citizens. That's his response to foreign-inspired terrorism. And then he spent 372 words, if you're counting, and I did, 372 words about how Americans shouldn't be so Islamophobic. His love letter back that day in 2009 in Cairo didn't work. His withdrawal of American troops from Iraq didn't work. His emphasis on his Muslim roots didn't work. So maybe he'll just take a run at those NRA types again. Who knows? He's got no clue.
But I don't want to put the cart before the horse. We don't have a strategy yet.
Look at that suit, eh? He's serious. This is all perfect for John Kerry, the failed 2004 Democratic presidential candidate. Just fine, he's been Obama's Secretary of State since Clinton left to start her presidential campaign. John Kerry has no clue about how to negotiate. His instincts, like Obama's, are anti-American, going back to when he led, when he made testimony against the war in Vietnam, testimony that is now being discredited as false. He's like Obama. He believes in a post-American world, and he has no clue how to go head-to-head with types like Vladimir Putin or the Iranian Ayatollahs. John Kerry loves the bureaucratic meetings of easier things, like global warming.
Climate change can now be considered another weapon of war, of mass destruction, perhaps even the world's most fearsome weapon of mass destruction.
That's his safe space, talking about global warming. It's still a year to go for Obama's president. I hope a Republican will win in 2016, and I think so too. Clinton is just too unlikable, unlike her husband Bill. She's too much responsibility for too many deep mistakes under Obama, especially Benghazi. I think a Republican, any Republican, would start to undo some of the damage caused by Obama. To me, the only question left is, in Obama's last year, will he ignore foreign affairs and just go golfing? Or will he have one last push? I don't know, against Israel maybe, a Palestinian state, something to win another Nobel Prize for? America is bigger than any one president, even a two-term disaster like Obama. America will survive. Too bad the same can't be said for Crimea, or the now extinct Christian communities of Syria and Iraq, or democratic movements from Libya to Syria to Iran. Stay with us. More ahead.
Allah Akbar. Allah Akbar.
That's videotape of a Russian fighter jet shot down by two Turkish fighter jets earlier this year. The Russian jet apparently crossed into Turkish airspace for 17 seconds. It has led to a rapid deterioration of relations between Russia and Turkey, and the whole region seems like it's about to change. Joining us now is Dr. Daniel Pipes, the president of the Middle East Forum, to help us make sense of things. Welcome back to the program, Dr. Pipes. I have a question for you. Has anything in the Middle East got better under Barack Obama's tenure? I'm not putting this all on his shoulders, but his grand entrance to foreign affairs in 2009 was his Middle East speech in Cairo. He said he was going to change everything. He even emphasized his middle name, Hussein. Barack Hussein Obama. He talked about growing up listening to the call of the muezzin to Muslims to prayer. Has anything in the Middle East gotten better under Obama?
Well, I mean, there's some things in the Middle East that have gotten better, but they're not due to American foreign policy. You know, American foreign policy has been a disaster. I don't know about you, but when I read about what Washington decisions are, I more or less ignore them. It would be like paying attention to what the Finns have decided for the Middle East. You know, it's just not important. There are no consequences. Rhetoric, it's wishes, it's hopes, but it's not an active foreign policy. It's been a disaster, and we many of us Americans are looking very much forward to it, to anybody instead of Obama. But that's not to say that nothing has improved in the Middle East in any way. Obviously, some things have.
Well, you say it's of no consequence, and that may be true, but it's that lack of consequence has created a tremendous void. Vladimir Putin seeks to fill it. Iran's Ayatollahs seek to fill it. The Saudis, in some way, I think, are trying to take up some of the space. And of course, most obviously, terrorist groups are filling some of the physical, the geographical void, too. Tell me what you think of the latest conflict between Turkey and Russia. Is that something that you think is going to deteriorate, maybe even get to the point of a shooting war?
I can't imagine a shooting war. Both of the leaders, Putin and Erdogan, are tough, aggressive types, but they both realize that a shooting war would be very nasty. Now, Putin has done this in Georgia, and he's done it in the Ukraine, but Turkey is a NATO member, and I don't think he's likely to do it there. Erdogan has been very belligerent in a number of arenas, but I don't think he's going to do it against Russia. So no shooting war. But the relations between the two states have deteriorated fast in the weeks since the shoot-down. They have a whole lot of consequences. One interesting consequence is that it's forcing Erdogan to turn back to NATO. He needs NATO in a way he didn't before. He's going to be a better ally, which isn't saying much. He's going to be a better ally. Also, he started making noises about fixing relations with Israel. He's feeling awfully isolated at the moment. So I think Erdogan went a step too far in shooting down that plane. None of his allies support him in it, and he's going to be more cautious in the future. So that in itself is something positive. Also, the Russians, in their anger at the Turkish government, are starting to help the Kurds some more, and that's a good thing. If there's any positive factor in the Syrian civil war, it's the Kurds. So anybody who helps the Kurds is fine in my book.
I agree. I mean, they're the only people who are staying and fighting their ground. And to me, it's enormously symbolic how many Kurdish women are fighting. Now, I sense that some of that is a PR flourish to appeal to Western liberals like you and me. But it is a fact that the Kurds do not believe in the strict Sharia law. They don't believe in the subordination of women to men. I think it's quite inspiring to see these unveiled women holding their own against the Islamic State. I think instead of fleeing the zone, as a million Syrian men have done, I think that one of the immediate consequences, and it's hard to tell because there's so much propaganda in the region, was that to punish Turkey, instead of launching missiles at Turkey, Vladimir Putin unloaded an enormous arsenal at Turkey's military allies in Syria, the militias that are loyal to Turkey in the north there, and is just pummeling them with submarine-launched cruise missiles, air-launched cruise missiles, just taking out his wrath on Turkey's allies in Syria, including cutting off the oil supply to Syria from the Islamic State. It's almost like he can't punch back at Turkey, so he's punching back at everything he can.
Yeah, agreed. So we're in agreement that there are some positive aspects of this. In other words, you've got these two neighborhood toughs, and instead of bullying the regular guys, they're bullying each other. That's overall not a bad thing, so long as they don't actually escalate to military confrontation.
Now, what about Israel? In a way, Israel has stayed quite quiet about the Islamic State. I mean, there are Islamic State terrorists in the Sinai. There have been the odd incident popping up in Gaza. But on the whole, I think Israel has been fairly immune to the Islamic State. There has been this intifada of the knife, where ordinary Palestinians have tried, and with terrible success, stabbing Jews. But the kind of Islamic State paramilitary or military-style terrorism seems to avoid Israel. And I think Israel, wisely from a geopolitical relations, diplomatic relations point of view, has sort of kept out of it. Let everyone else fight each other. Israel will be this island of relative peace and security. What do you think of that?
That has, in fact, been the case. I agree with you, but there are signs that will change. Just recently came news that a Muslim Israeli soldier from an elite infantry brigade has gone over to the other side and joined ISIS. Just recently has come news that the Israeli security services now believe that ISIS will be targeting Israel, be pointing more its aggressiveness towards Israel. So the good times may be over for Israel. They may be far more involved than they have been in the past. They're certainly preparing themselves for that possibility.
You know, I try not to watch Islamic State propaganda videos because they are so gory. They show so much actual murder. It's like watching a snuff film. It destroys your own sensitivities and your humanity to watch them. But I came across one that was in Russian, and it has a drumming chant. They have a kind of music. They don't like regular music, the Islamic State, but they sort of auto-tune chants and prayers into toe-tapping songs. I know that sounds crazy. and it was an entire Russian language terrorist snuff film, and the refrain was "soon, very soon." Skoro ochin skoro. They're going to attack Russia en masse. Do you think the Islamic State, I guess they've already downed one Russian jetliner over Sinai, do you think the Islamic State has the ability to wreak the kind of terrorism in Russia proper that they're threatening to in their propaganda videos?
I think they do. I think, more importantly, they're completely incautious. They have an apocalyptic mindset. They're ready to take on everyone at the same time. And as a result, they've got enemies everywhere. With the exception of Turkey and Qatar, every single state you can think of is anti-ISIS. ISIS is a matter of some tens of thousands, maybe 50,000 militiamen, and they're confronting the entire world. Now, until the entire world gets serious and puts in ground troops, ISIS will continue to exist. But should these provocations continue with murders around the world, it very well could see some kind of expeditionary force go in and root it out. I think between the danger of external invasion, economic collapse, internal disgruntlement, and disagreements among the leadership, the possibility of an ISIS collapse is very real. I think it can disappear just as fast as it appeared. I don't see it as a long-term threat. I do see the ideas of ISIS, the caliphate, and this extreme Sunni Islamism as continuing. But ISIS itself, I think, will be gone by.
I'm going to politely disagree with you, because for every Islamic State terrorist who dies, there's 2 volunteers willing to take their place. David Goldman argues that there's 10, 20 million young men just waiting to enter the meat grinder, no economic prospects, nothing better to do, and this is an inspiring adventure, like a, hey, young men, come on an adventure, and by the way, you can shoot guns, rape Yazidi rape slaves, and the worst that'll happen is you'll become a martyr. I think that it will take an on-the-ground extirpation, but I don't see the courage in America, in France, in Germany, in the UK, certainly not in Canada. I don't know, maybe Iranian ground troops and Russian Air Force will do it. Last question, do you think China might be involved? I know the Islamic State murdered their first Chinese national and boasted about it publicly. The Chinese president specifically rebuked that. I don't think Chinese forces have ever been active outside Southeast Asia. Do you think China might be provoked into reacting in some way?
I don't think the Chinese themselves will take action, but I think as part of some larger expeditionary force, say of the sort that was mounted in 1991 against Saddam Hussein, that could certainly happen. And yes, you're right that there are new recruits, but I don't think the number of new recruits are infinite. And I would argue to you that the greater impact of ISIS is to discuss so many Muslims about this extraordinarily extreme form of Sunni Islamism. I think ISIS is doing great damage to the Islamist movement. Muslims are appalled by it. Many more appalled by it than attracted to it.
I take your point. I look at the Pew survey that showed 60 million Muslims support the Islamic State in countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, where they surveyed. So yes, it's in the 10 to 15% range, let's say, but that's still a huge number. Listen, Dr. Pipes, I could talk to you all day as I spitball different ideas and run different things by you. You've got a great command of the region. I hope that 2016, that your predictions will come true. I hope that ISIS, the Islamic State, will exhaust itself financially, economically, in terms of personnel, and I hope the Muslim world will turn against it. I'm a pessimist, and I don't think until someone like Putin comes along or maybe Iran comes along to destroy them on the ground, I don't think they're going to be rolled back. But maybe we can talk again in the new year as developments unroll.
I'll look forward to that.
Thanks very much. Dr. Pipes is with the Middle East Forum. Stay with us. More after these words.
Ontario residents are being hosed on electricity prices. The latest Auditor General's report says we've been overcharged by $37 billion over the last several years. That works out to nearly $2,800 for every man, woman, and child. Why? Mismanagement and bad policy choices from the Ontario Liberals. It's going to cost us billions more in coming years. Energy Minister Bob Chiarelli won't take responsibility. He's lashing out. It's time for Bob to go. If you agree, go to firebob.ca. That's firebob.ca and make your voice heard.
Listen, I don't mean to depress you, right? When it's almost the New Year's Eve, we're supposed to be happy, but how can you look back over the last 7 years of Barack Obama without saying it is a disaster, an entirely different kind of disaster than whatever mistakes George W. Bush made, and he made plenty, but at least he had a certain center. He wanted America to be strong and project freedom and force around the world. Obama has almost made the opposite kind of mistakes, appeasing, surrendering, running away, and giving his license to every regional strongman or tough around the world. I think that the Middle East is the worst of it, but there's other problems, including in Southeast Asia, that Barack Obama has planted. I have to say that it's going to be another difficult year for foreign affairs before, hopefully, a Republican takes office at the end of 2016. That's the show for today. Let me know what you think. Send us your email to Ezra@TheRebel.media, Facebook us, or tweet me on Twitter. That's it for now, folks. Keep fighting for freedom.